Thrilled to present our panel discussion on the future of blockchain in government, moderated by Dr. Adam Rusch, a teaching assistant professor at the School of Information Sciences, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Adam resides on the Cardano Civics Committee at Intersect MBO, where he provides facilitation and oversight to the Cardano community related to the governance of Cardano, including the Cardano Improvement Proposal 1694, which creates the most comprehensive decentralized governance system, including the ratification of an on-chain constitution later this year. So please, if you guys give a warm welcome to Dr. Adam Rusch and his distinguished panelists.
Thank you, Cullen, for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As you said, my name is Adam Rusch from the University of Illinois. I'm thrilled to be here for this panel on the future of blockchain in government. I especially want to thank our sponsors for this event, Cardano Project Catalyst, the Swap, and of course, Stand with Crypto for helping to make this possible. So as blockchain technology continues to evolve and disrupt traditional systems, it presents both opportunities and challenges for government regulation and policy. Today, we're privileged to have two distinguished guests with us to discuss this proposition. Jim Harper is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and an authority on privacy issues and constitutional law. At the Competitive Enterprise Institute and the Cato Institute, he wrote on the intersection of business, technology, and public policy, including privacy, surveillance, and cryptocurrencies. He served on a host of subcommittees as counsel and really done a lot to provide thought on this industry. Thank you. Nick Longo is an expert in digital assets, managing investments for families, founders, and institutions at Fortuna, a registered investment advisor. He was an early employee of Arkham Intelligence, an aggregator of crypto, wallet, and market data. He's been a proponent of Bitcoin for a decade and involved in the space. So our discussion will explore the issues at hand, and we'll start with asking each of you to tell us a little bit about how you found your way to your current positions and what you think it is most important for us to keep in mind.
How am I doing so far in terms of professional show business? Well, I'll talk in terms of crypto rather than the whole bio. But I learned about Bitcoin, I think around 2011, when a dialed-in Silicon Valley contributor to the Cato Institute, where I was working, brought it to my attention, and it brought together these threads that I thought were fascinating. I work a lot on privacy, so financial privacy is obvious of interest. Open source software, cryptography. I'm not an expert, but monetary policy is interesting to me, and it brought them all together. And so I took an interest in crypto back in 2011. Bought my first Bitcoin for $10, and it was promptly stolen off the exchange from which I bought it. On the 10th birthday of, I started talking about it after a few years. I didn't want to put any more negatives on Bitcoin than it already had with a lot of people in DC. I started talking about the security challenges, and on the 10th birthday, CoinDesk did an interview with me where I characterized my purchase plan for Bitcoin. And had I done my whole purchase plan and had it not been stolen, it would have been worth about $27 million. That's three years ago or so.
Many such cases.
Lots of cases like that. Easy come, easy go.
I was about to offer you $12 for it, so that's unfortunate.
So what do you remember? Not your keys, not your coins? That's a good one. That's a good one to remember. I don't know. I think I'm inspired by what Maggie said in her opening. To remember, we'll talk a lot about, of course, Bitcoin and government, Bitcoin in government, which maybe are two separate topics. But a lot of this was meant to surpass government. And so keep your eye on the prize, which is to have a system in which people are more in control of their lives through their money, through their ability to transact, interact, and through DAOs create self-sustaining systems that are outside of government and outside of the corporate sector. So there's the vision. We're on long, slow steps toward that vision. I think that vision is what to keep in mind.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So my journey to Bitcoin began around 2013 when some friends of mine had just read about it on the internet, and I started to look more into it, and then kind of followed the mining markets and also just started to buy a little bit. And I sort of became more of a properly pro-Bitcoin supporter in 2018 when I read The Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And since then, around that point, I decided I wanted to participate more professionally in crypto. So ultimately, I ended up working at a great crypto startup called Arkham, which does a lot of excellent data aggregation and market information distribution using their platform for different institutions that are active in crypto and people who want to learn more about the institutions that are active in crypto. And then last year, I transitioned full-time to an investment management firm that is active in operating some crypto strategies, along with some other core strategies across all different asset classes. And I'm just here to share a bit of what I've learned and learn more about what everyone here is working on.
So thank you. Both of you mentioned part of what brought you to Bitcoin and blockchain, cryptocurrencies, all of which are intertwined, was the idea of people being able to have control of their money, control of their destiny, so to speak. It's really that cypherpunk vision that Bitcoin emerged from. How aware of the cypherpunk movement, I guess, were you before you found Bitcoin, and would you have sort of like characterized that as any of your inspiration, or was that something where you look at that and sort of say, like, they have some good points, and I see what they're saying about Bitcoin and I like it? Because it sounded like I heard that in your answers.
Well, I guess I would never claim being a cypherpunk because I don't code. I'm a lawyer. Kick me out now. But I feel like I go way back on that vision, and the example I can cite to you is that I have a professional friendship with John Gilmore, one of the founders of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and one of the early cypherpunks. I went to law school in San Francisco, and he lives there, and it's been a while. I don't get out there that often anymore, but we used to go have breakfast at the Pork Store Cafe on Haight Street, Upper Haight, which is an excellent place to get a breakfast. Now Milwaukee's got great food, but this is a place where you can get a pile of hash browns like the size of your head, one order. Anyway, talking to John for me has always been interesting because he's like a good level set on someone who's radical in a good way, and I'm in DC dressing like this and going and talking to the powers that be, and I want to check in with him all the time. So I've been talking to folks like that, and that's again part of what inspired me to Bitcoin. Is like I saw all these things coming together. Now, mind you, this is the last time I talked to him about it, which is a while ago. He wasn't too excited about Bitcoin, and maybe he saw ahead of me that it's a highly trackable system, so it doesn't have quite all the liberty values, at least in the original code, that we might have hoped for.
So I'm on the younger side. I was still in high school when I learned about Bitcoin, and so much of the work that the cypherpunks did to pave the way for Bitcoin was occurring even decades before then. So I wasn't initially influenced in a significant way by them, but along my journey in the mid-2010s, late 2010s, I came across some of the historical archival that was put together by the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. And in their online library, you can read a lot of these old emails and research papers and white papers that were put together by those guys, I think all the way back to like the 50s and the 60s. And so I developed a great appreciation for all the legwork that went into making something like Bitcoin even possible on a technical level. That was really a multi-decade process, and it's paved the way for the entire crypto ecosystem today. And I think a lot of those people also, even before Satoshi had conceived of the design for Bitcoin, understood the need for basically digital commodities that could allow individuals to store wealth outside of government control. And even in a world where governments are positively interacting with crypto development and blockchain development and Bitcoin and are working towards its enlargement, a way to sort of a safeguard for people who might want to leave the country for a while and establish something elsewhere or build things outside of the borders of the U.S.
Can I just jump on a little thing? So Nick said something. He said, I'm a little bit younger. And that happens to me more and more often. Like every year, I get more and more to be sounding like the old guy. I stop people on the street now to give them financial advice. That's where you get to. No, I'm remembering that this vision, the sort of cypherpunk vision, it really kind of lives in important places. A couple of months ago, I had Chris Dixon with Andreessen Horowitz for an event at the American Enterprise Institute on his book, Read, Write, Own. And he was talking about the internet the way it used to be. The internet before Facebook and Google and the other platforms was really wide open. And so, not financial advice, but you kids, go read The Cathedral and the Bazaar by Eric Raymond, right? That's going to help you get it. And it's nice that Chris Dixon, who's a well-positioned VC, has in mind an internet through crypto that is like what it's supposed to be. I think we're in, you take a little bit of a long view of things. I talked about the investment play as being one step in the broader horizon of crypto. Take a long view of things, and the current corporatization of the web or the Facebookization or however you might want to call it, that's a step, and there are going to be future steps. And I think even cloud computing is going to go away again when everybody has their own storage, and we'll move back out to from a mainframe storage environment back out to a decentralized storage environment. There's much to come, and working on building that is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating how you mentioned that. The precursor to all the social media and everything we have. I remember seeing in the historical records, as they would say, pictures of the literal phone book of everybody who had a node on the internet. You could flip through the pages and be able to call up the person if you needed them to restart their computer. And that's almost where we are right now with when you can ask people what's your wallet address? They can just tell it to you for blockchain networks. But moving along, Jim, given your extensive background in privacy and financial regulation, what policies and regulatory frameworks do you think would help us to see the balance of regulation of government and yet allowing for innovation and self-sovereignty for individuals in this country?
Well, there are a number of crypto regulatory issues that I don't do. So I'll talk about the one that I'm strongest on, which is privacy, or the opposite of privacy, which is know your customer, anti-money laundering, customer due diligence, whatever three-letter term you want to use for it. This policy is an abomination in so many different ways, and maybe with the easiest, it's just a huge upfront cost, and it's a huge impediment to innovation. This idea that any provider of financial services has to know in some detail who their customer is, what their customer is doing with the money, what their customer's source of the funds was, who their customer is interacting with. This policy has metastasized over years, and it shape shifts depending on the current vogues. It became a counterterrorism policy after September 11, 2001, where its origin was just in tax havens like Switzerland and other things. The costs. So I've done one of the costs, which is impediments to innovation. New innovators have to spend a lot of money on lawyers just to get started, and that's just a kill for the smallest companies. It costs probably double-digit billions globally. That's just money taken out of the financial system and wasted, where it could go to lower ATM fees and every other thing, just lowering the cost of payments. But the banks, the financial services providers are spending all kinds of money trying to make sure they know who we are. De-risking, which is refusing to serve particular business segments, even refusing to serve entire countries. So like Somalia was de-risked entirely. There are global dangers that are really, really poorly addressed by cutting off their access to financial services, because even countries where those dangers lie have lots and lots of good people who could be building up their economies, who could be paying taxes to the legitimate governments there, who could be helping those countries become secure places, not havens for terror. So it's just backwards. It's just wrong every single way. There's no way to assess this policy because the government has never put together any metrics to show that it is cost effective. But the best metrics available using seized assets as a proxy for security. This stuff is hard to do. So used seized assets as a proxy for security. And the global financial surveillance regime returns something like 0.1% on every dollar spent. So 20, 30, 40, $50 billion spent so that billion with a B, so that $50 million can get seized. It's a failure through and through. So I'd really love to see a big policy conversation about that. It's cross-cutting. It's not just crypto. But that's the policy I'd like to see changed the most.
Yeah, Nick?
Yeah, I think I would like to speak a bit to that. Whether it's, I guess, whether it's like AML or KYC or capital controls, Americans who are bound by those laws may not be able to legally avoid them with crypto, but there's still the possibility that by having capital in crypto, they can access more of the global market and go around some of the regulations of other countries internationally who might be restricting foreign investment by effectively moving those projects and those ventures to the cloud instead of being a project in Nigeria or Brazil. So I think that's something that we've already accomplished. As far as like regulations today, I'm actually sort of surprised with how hands-off, and I don't mean this like absolutely, but relative to what my expectation was, that the Biden administration has not cracked down more stringently on some of the potential violations of KYC or taxes or AML in the U.S. They've certainly, in the first couple of years, created a bit of a culture of fear among exchange operators and entrepreneurs. But it seems that as time has gone on, we've sort of reached a detente in the marketplace, and there's been, and this is reflected in the price, like a renewed confidence in the investability of crypto. So
I'll take a little issue with you,
Yeah.
not in an important way. I've been really interested in how it's really crystallized in the last 2 months or so, how the Biden administration's, certain figures in the Biden administration's negativity toward crypto has gelled into a real sort of partisan divide. Primarily Gary Gensler, the chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission, has been a real pain to the crypto industry in the U.S. But Senator Warren, Sheila Warren, has an anti-crypto army or whatever it is. After a while, people started to get sick of that, and President Trump found this community, and they've embraced him wholeheartedly now. And so now there's sort of a partisan divide, which is for good and bad. Trump's stock is rising. He may get elected. He may follow through on things he said to the crypto community. Those are big mays. I don't think he's a very credible orator. But that's you can't even tell if the Biden administration leadership or their campaign notices this happening. And I'm interested. I'm not a good really political watcher. I'm much more of a policy person. But it may be that the money that the crypto community is putting forward makes a difference. And as our elections are really tightly contested, this might be a community that matters. And it's a community that the Biden administration has really, truly alienated. I think contrary to Biden's instincts, by the way, which are centrist, kind of, center-left instincts, he's not He's not controlling his agency heads like a president might. So interesting stuff. My perception is that the Biden administration has been strongly negative on crypto, and they may pay a price for it.
Yeah, it's been certainly interesting to see that divide in the Democratic Party of how the Biden administration has allowed their members to become so strongly anti-crypto, while there's a lot of pro-crypto, especially younger members of the party who are pro-crypto. While in the Republicans, you see the anti-crypto people almost being pushed out of the party.
And I guess I should observe, for the benefit of those, we're crypto people here, right? You're in the best spot politically when you're gettable. So if crypto becomes an all-Republican team, well, then the Democrats don't have to try.
Absolutely.
And you saw in certain votes the resolution of disapproval of an SEC rule about crypto accounting, that there were a good number of Democrats in the House were on crypto's side.
Same with Fit 21.
Yeah, and we should acknowledge that and say, hey, we want to work with you on that. I'm not a partisan myself. I was a Republican staffer when I was on the Hill, but that's so long ago that has no bearing on the party we have today. But be gettable. Don't just become one team or the other, or else you lose your political power.
Now, Nick, regardless of some of the policies that the government has, we can advocate for the changes in KYC and such. And one of the big issues I see with KYC is the fact that you are requiring companies to hold on to all this data, and you create these honeypots of information being held by people who may not have the best security setups. They may be infiltrated by hackers who want to extract that and use it to make some money off the people, steal their identities. What kind of blockchain tools do we have that could replace that, so that we don't have to have the same kind of KYC regime? But still, if there's a terrorist or a bad actor who is moving assets around, moving money around the world, how would we be able to, find who that person is and take, law enforcement against them?
Sure. So I think one benefit of crypto, as I sort of alluded before, is you are able to, as an American citizen, open accounts internationally with some crypto service providers like an exchange. Another great tool I think we have at our disposal is decentralized exchanges. So with a decentralized exchange, you can take a position in a cryptocurrency and you can hold it, and you don't need to necessarily have that data sent directly to the government. But if you are doing that with money that's been stolen, or if you're doing that with assets that are used for criminal activity, eventually, and this seems to be almost always the case, those people do want to take those assets off the blockchain into their local financial system and withdraw them for some degree of personal use. And I think the market for crypto software has made it very easy at that off-ramp point to begin tracking assets that are believed to have been used for criminal activity. And so I think that's about as good of a balance as we're going to get for the time being, that people can speculate in crypto, build on crypto without having to report it. And when somebody starts to do something wrong and gets greedy, we can start to take action against them and at least have a place to start that investigation.
I want to tell you a story, and I'm going to tell you about a paper that I might write and I might actually publish, but we'll just have to see. A zillion years ago, when I was with the Bitcoin Foundation, I was contacted by a law enforcement agent, I believe in New Zealand, might have been Australia, who said that he saw crypto being used to pay for child porn. And he was asking me genuinely, as far as I could tell, how do I catch the bad guy? How do I follow the money trail to catch the bad guy? And I realized then, a lot of us got into crypto because we were so excited about the privacy potential. But if you look down the horizon, and the idea at the time was we thought that Bitcoin was going to be the world's currency within a few years. The Bitcoin Foundation reimbursed your expenses in Bitcoin. So like over the course of 1 month, I lost like $1,700 on my expenses by the time I got my expense report in. But we were looking to build, the whole enchilada. The conversation with this man made me think, hang on a second. We don't only want privacy. We want some balance. We want some way for this to be a law-abiding environment. But we also want privacy. These are very hard to do. Right now, it's a heavily surveilled environment. As Nick pointed out, at the on-ramps and off-ramps, you've got heavy surveillance, and you've got companies that are, in the business of tracking online asset, tracking your crypto assets and analysis to track everything down. So we've got a really poor environment for privacy right now. But we do want privacy, but we also want law enforcement. And the idea that I hit on, that I have tried to write up, and I will go back to that paper again and try some more until it actually works for me, is to have a parallel communications channel, not technically parallel in any real sense, but a way of saying to a given address through the wallet, hey, an adjacent transaction was a child porn transaction, or that those were stolen funds, or those were whatever the case may be. Offering people, this is a global system, so it can't necessarily be anything mandatory, though maybe domestically it could be mandatory in some senses. This is why it's a hard paper. Could say, hey, you interacted with someone we think is a criminal. Here are our bona fides. Here's what we're telling you about this case. We're willing to prove it to a certain level. Can you tell us who that was? And I think it just might be a situation where people would participate with law enforcement against real criminals. You see a nice, neat gradient in reporting bad acts, right? Post 911, which I was alive for. You young people may not have been. Post 911, everybody came forward with anything that could possibly help. And you see a nice, neat gradient. When the crime doesn't matter, when it's malum prohibitum, that is some regulatory crime that nobody cares about, nobody's really coming forward. But theft and murder and mayhem and terrorism, people report like crazy. So why not take advantage of the fact that good people want a law-abiding society, not by enabling surveillance on the blockchain, but perhaps a communications channel adjacent that allows law enforcement with legitimate investigations to communicate to people and invite information about bad acts.
Yeah, that very much speaking to that civil libertarian position of having the individual legwork done of law enforcement, where we can have checks and balances of warrants, of procedures and policies that make sure those agencies hopefully don't overstep their bounds, and as opposed to mass surveillance, it just vacuums everything up and then sorts through it later, and you can show me the man, I'll show you the crime type of policy. So Jim, you've highlighted a lot of these benefits of blockchain for individuals and inclusion. How can blockchain technology be leveraged to support the U.S. financial system, do you think, particularly in terms of reducing costs, increasing efficiency for unbanked and underbanked populations?
Well, I'll having just made myself unpopular by suggesting that law enforcement should be able to ask for information, I'll make myself unpopular a different way, which is the possibility of a U.S. central bank digital currency.
Okay, we're done.
Right? You heard yesterday from Chris Giancarlo, who's the executive chairman of the Digital Dollar Project, and he is a very charming person, and he invited me to be an advisor to the Digital Dollar Project, which has probably made me more amenable to the idea than I otherwise would have been. I don't count myself as a supporter of a central bank digital currency, but I'm trying to work very hard to make sure that if there is a U.S. CBDC, that it comports with our values. So you'll see a lot of writings from me on the AEI blog about how, it kind of needs to be decentralized. It definitely needs to be token-based and not account-based. And frankly, if I can get my way, if there is a CBDC, which is very much, it's especially in doubt now that the Republican platform says no to one. But if there is a U.S. CBDC, I think the only way to do it right would be to use an open blockchain. There are configurations that you cannot have it like the Bitcoin blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, to my dismay, we discovered after a little while of thinking it was really good for privacy, we discovered that public keys are a really good identifier. So you can't actually have a transaction format like that. But if you design transaction formats or masking like zero knowledge proofs, so that there are not identifiers in the blockchain, and you are not required to identify yourself in order to nominate transactions for a blockchain. That could work in terms of privacy and liberty. So there's a blockchain use case that the U.S. could use. I'll jump to the other side of that, of whether there's really much role for blockchain in government. Blockchain is good for getting people who don't trust each other together. And I testified to the House Small Business Committee a few years ago on this idea that you can kind of have a better open data environment using blockchain, where people are putting information in, and you're sort of changing the scope and membership of a data collective. The government could do that with its own information, but you don't necessarily need blockchain for that. You need to get over whatever humps, and there are many, that keep the government from publishing information about its activities in the first place. So it doesn't really matter whether you use blockchain or not. You need to get over those challenges that the government still suffers in terms of transparency.
Nick?
Sure. So yeah, I'll just talk about one thing that I've noticed lately. I mean, I guess if you're somebody who's underbanked, or I would say a much bigger category in the U.S. would be people who are underserved by their bank, people who might want to take out a loan for some kind of home repair or some kind of business, small business expansion, and who don't have a huge stock portfolio, or maybe some of those who do have a large stock portfolio to draw a loan against. A lot of small business owners, their options are to get like a cash advance from their bank, or get like a merchant cash advance, or get some other kind of ridiculously predatory loan that's going to be charging what's essentially like a 30% annual percentage rate. And there's a lot of the crypto lending solutions that did once exist have rightfully, they have been eliminated from the market after over leveraging themselves, but there remain a great many decentralized and centralized provisioners of loans and liquidity to people who have on-chain assets, or who have assets that can be translated into some kind of on-chain token. So I think, being a small business owner who can essentially take what's in their savings account, put it into stable coins, and then take a loan on that at 15% instead of 30%, that's not going to be game-changing for the majority of Americans, but it's going to be meaningful enough that it can spur innovation and expansion and increase participation in wealth building in the U.S.
That's great. So, Nick, you specialize in helping people invest in cryptocurrencies and blockchain-based assets. Can you tell us a little bit more about how blockchain-based solutions are being used in these cases, and what people do to invest in this area?
Yeah, I think, and really my point about the Biden administration was mainly attributable to the fact that we now have ETFs that are providing exposure to Bitcoin and other assets. And I think that's really a game changer. I think that's going to drive a lot of institutional adoption of Bitcoin, and it's going to enrich Americans who are at a loss on how to better diversify their portfolios in what's a fairly expensive equity environment and a fairly risky environment for corporate bonds, and where for most treasury instruments you're not getting much of a real return at all, despite higher interest rates, given how rapidly inflation has grown in this country. So I think given that we have a really robust number of exchanges that have survived the last few downturns in the U.S., and we have the ETF products coming online, and we have all sorts of other robo-advisor solutions, I think those they're really bridging the gap between people who are have fully built their retirement plan and their business plans and their savings plans on the legacy financial system, but who want to start taking advantage of this new technology that's out there.
Astute comments on the breadth of investments that people have access to. I'll tell you a quick story that dovetails with some of this other stuff. My dad, 89 years old, a bit of a gold bug, has decided to diversify into Bitcoin. And for some reason, he got fed up with Coinbase and couldn't acquire the Bitcoin there. So he says, "Can I buy some of yours, Jim?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I think I have to do a Know Your Customer program on you, or I'm going to go to jail." So we're still hashing that out. I'm not sure how to prove that I know who my dad is for the government's benefit. Anyway,
Very good. You've been, notably. I'm trying to find a word other than hard on the government. I'm just going to say hard on the government about this. But what are your thoughts on corporations and the amount of data that they're using about us, and what fears do we have, and what options do we have to guard against the corporate influence into our lives and intrusion into our activities?
perfectly legit concern. The government is my bigger concern because it has the coercive power that it does, right? Google has not yet sent armed agents to anybody's door. Who did I joke with? So I posted a blog post on IEI the other day about how Ticketmaster, at the behest of the IRS, wants my social security number so they can report the proceeds of some ticket sales I sold. I'm a DC United. I'm making myself an enemy again. I'm a DC United season ticket holder. To all those of you who are soccer, that's a soccer team. It used to be good in Washington DC. I sold some tickets. Ticketmaster wants my social security number, and so it's a great blog post for people who hate Ticketmaster and the IRS because they're colluding to destroy
farming
to destroy my financial privacy. And a friend tweeted, am I going to get any trouble if I give Ticketmaster wrong information? And I tweeted back to him, well, the Ticketmaster armed agents are going to be at your door anytime now. That's a long way of saying I worry more about the government than I do about the private sector, which is voluntary. That's almost definitional, right? Sort of, if it's a government actor, it does get to do things like come to your door with guns, or it's a criminal. So, and I'm rather, relative to the average person, I'm rather blasé, frankly. Even though I'm a privacy person, I'm rather blasé about the advertising stuff that does offend a lot of people. And I am actually an advocate of them being able to protect their privacy. The Know Your Customer rules are the exact opposite of that. They're required to collect and keep information about you. So that's ruinous for people who prioritize that. But how about an environment that's decorporatized? A DAO, should one ever actually really succeed, is a way of getting together. A corporation is just a special kind of social organization. It's a little social machine. It's endowed with a little bit of limited liability, which makes it a little more attractive. I'm not sure that actually holds up against libertarian principle to even have a corporation with limited liability, but it's there. It's a special kind of machine. For a couple of hundred years, it's made us more productive as a society. So it's not my number one target. But I'm perfectly fine with having uncorporate sectors. That is, you could, and what Bitcoin and blockchain applications could do is decorporatize financial services and replace this industry with software. It's just a brilliant opportunity. The many colleagues of mine in Washington, D.C. sometimes slip from arguing for free markets to arguing for business models. No, free markets don't guarantee anyone a business model, not even the advertising sector. So I'm for whatever actually serves people the most. And the people who want to get away from the privacy invasive business model of advertising based on data should be able to do that. And I encourage anything that gets them that. So
just say one word about the privacy question. I think it's very important that people are able to protect their privacy in the face of intrusions from corporations or the government. But it's also worth considering that the greater freedom which we may be afforded yet by Bitcoin is not from privacy intrusions by very large companies or the government, which are going to occur regardless of what we do, but from the monetary policy that we find ourselves in and the monetary policy failures of the last 50 years that have begun to really show themselves in many Americans' daily lives. And so I think the main thing, the priority that I think we should aim to protect is the integrity of the Bitcoin network, the availability of the Bitcoin network, and I think winning over the government and the largest companies in America and the largest lobbying firms and foundations in America is integral to that, and getting them on our side so that we can all become wealthier as a public.
Great. And Nick, what are some of the primary challenges that you think governments then face in adopting blockchain technology for their operations, and how can these challenges be addressed so that they can become allies of the people, so to speak, and we can all move to this future of a more cooperative atmosphere?
Yeah, so I thought about this a lot. I think maybe the biggest challenge in legislating and regulating crypto and adopting crypto is deciding how it should be adopted at the national level and at the state level and at the local level. How what should the government's priority be with respect to crypto? And I think there's two ways to think about adoption of new technologies. The first is we're just going to make a big list of all the things that this technology could potentially solve for, and then we're just going to try them all. I think the more serious approach would be to think of, ask ourselves, what is the greatest problem that we face that this technology could solve at a very large scale? And I don't think it's possible to answer that question without coming across and thinking about and reflecting on our entitlement, our issues with our entitlements. So currently in every state in America, except for, I think it's like 4, so like 90% of state governments, we have underfunded pensions and underfunded healthcare systems. That's $1 trillion, $2 or $3 trillion gap, depending on how you calculate it, that is being paid for by every taxpayer effectively, and also more directly former employees of the government and current employees of the government. And at the national level, we've got about $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities on Medicare and Social Security. And there's sort of three problems that are causing, with these systems, that are causing Americans to lose trust in these promises that they've been made. And the first is inflation. $2,000 a month from Social Security isn't really worth what it was even 10 years ago, especially not 15 or 20 years ago when somebody joined a government agency or a big company. The second problem is basically that we have more people retiring than we do joining the workforce, and the people who are retiring are taking out a lot more money than the new employees of these governments are contributing. And the third problem is that these plans have just not been invested at a very high rate of return. So we've got, and so we have to ask ourselves, is there a technological solution to any of these problems? And for the first one, the problem of inflation, it's a very complex issue. It can't be solved entirely by any technology. The second problem is basically a problem of demography, of demographic changes and cash flow, and that can't really be solved at all by a technology. It's a very structural, long-term trend. And the third problem of pension fund returns and Social Security, the growth of the value of our Social Security fund, actually I think can be solved by technology, and specifically blockchain technology. The pension funds in the US that are doing especially well have made use of a particular financial technology, which I would call the equity markets. I would submit that is a form of financial technology. We're basically taking the value of businesses and we're distributing it across largely computer systems into people's future pension, the value that they hold in that pension plan. And I think at this point, we need to seriously ask ourselves, I think every pension plan in America is asking themselves how we can start to catch up. And most of these plans are not really able to allocate anymore to equities because they're so expensive, and they have a mandate that restricts them from putting most of their money into equities. I think most plans, most governors, governors and treasurers around the country realize that they're not actually able to get very much positive real return from fixed income securities. And so I think the one technology that we have left in our arsenal to fix that problem of returns is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been returning, over the last 10 years, at least 60%, by some measures over the last several years, maybe closer to 40%, especially net of any kind of transaction costs. And when you start to see numbers that big, even if you were to project out over the next 10 years that they're going to be a lot lower, say 15% or 20%, that has the potential to solve this multi-trillion-dollar problem. And so I think maybe as a first and radical proposal for how the government should be looking to adopt Bitcoin, they should be looking at its place in our national wealth and our different pension plans, and maybe even Social Security.
Number go up.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I think we have some time for questions from the audience, so I'd love to open it up. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, my name is Eric Peterson. I'm a policy director for Satoshi Action Fund. I want to stick on what you talked about at the end, because we're in the state of Wisconsin, for two reasons. Number one is they do have mostly a funded pension system now because they took the structural reforms under Act 10 about a decade ago. But they're also the first state to publicly come out and invest in Bitcoin, specifically $160 million. Nobody had really thought of Wisconsin as a state that would do that. People think maybe Texas or Florida, someplace where there's a lot of activity. So what sort of door opening do you think that Wisconsin, where we're sitting right now, has potentially brought in that? And is part of it due just to the fact that BlackRock is offering them Bitcoin rather than going on Kraken or Coinbase and Gemini having something?
I think, your point about BlackRock is absolutely pivotal. The state of Wisconsin Investment Board, in addition to Governor Walker's reforms and steady hand, I think are all kind of part of the picture for how Wisconsin has done so well. The state of Wisconsin Investment Board has always been very forward-thinking with these sorts of things, and there are other states who have very forward-thinking financial managers. So I think having the access through established legacy asset managers is huge. Obviously, there are certain downsides for holding an ETF over spot Bitcoin, but those don't apply so much, I think, to at the state level where your use of those funds is very restricted. So I would anticipate other states to follow. We've seen El Salvador as a really shining example of maximal Bitcoin adoption. And if other states were to even put 1% or less than 1% of their balance sheets for their pension plans into Bitcoin, or even a bit into something like Ethereum, we could start to see them reap the benefits of that very, very quickly over the next 2-3 years. And if that starts to happen, I think there's a preference cascade that's inevitable. And as far as what people can do to facilitate that, I think it's just having the conversation with the administrators of these plans, with policymakers, with people in state administrations, and trying to explain to them how to think through the trade-offs associated with holding something like Bitcoin or a Bitcoin-linked product.
All right. Next question. Go ahead.
Hey there, I'm Chad Blackburn. So let's talk about the national debt and the money printer, and the fact that both parties have a really hard time not blasting the money printer. So folks like Preston Pish have put forward an idea that if the money printer is going to run, let's focus on trying to make sure that the United States is buying Bitcoin with a percentage of every new dollar created. Has that crossed your path? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's 100% going to save the American people trillions of dollars over the next 10 years even. And as Bitcoin rises, we not only have to compete with Bitcoin, we still have existing and probably future currency wars with other countries. And those countries are going to be looking to strengthen their balance sheets, if not their currencies, with some level of Bitcoin exposure. And we absolutely need to be doing the exact same thing first as the country where Bitcoin has seen some of the most productive research and development done.
A side comment. This all makes sense, perfectly legitimate. A side comment to me that I want to just make and invite others in the room to think about is, why is there so little outrage in general about inflation? It's absolutely horrible. It's unjust. The lower end of the economic strata gets ripped off the most. And I have friends, decent people, who wave their hands and say, "Oh, well, you just invest in assets that will fight off inflation." Well, there are still plenty of people in America today who hold most of their assets in cash at home, and they're losing because of inflation. It's outrageous, and it's outrageous to me that so many just wave that off, pretend like it's not important. There's a significant percentage of people in the U.S. they're very unhappy because the system is rigged against them, and part of that system rigging is inflation. Again, it's a side comment to the very important point you made.
Yeah, and it's absolutely, even if states invest in, increase the returns that they're getting on their plans, they're able to overfund and pay out more. The value that the participants in those plans, the citizenry is going to be receiving, is going to be worth a heck of a lot less due to inflation. And we really have to ask ourselves, what's the alternative to shoring up our public pensions and public government treasuries against this inflation. It's basically just austerity. It's cutting the value of payments that people receive, and that can only be described as theft of invested assets.
Next question. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Carl, CEO, entrepreneur, artist. My question is, given the current state of where we're at, let's say most common man doesn't even know what a wallet is. How do we go about of actually getting them to be familiar with these technologies?
Any thoughts?
I can tell you another story that validates it. I'm talking to my dad, 89 years old, about investing in Bitcoin, and I'm using the word wallet for at least two different things. One is the string of code, and the other is the software. And I'm imagining him now in that conversation going, "You just said a wallet was this. Now you're saying a wallet was that." It's super complicated, and I don't know. I'm just here to validate your hard question. Someone out in the entrepreneurial sector needs to do that, or all the different businesses that are trying to engage with consumers. And a real important problem for self-sovereignty is getting people to think about how they can store credentials, such as private keys, on their own in a way that's entirely secure against all threats, and also replicable in case they die or whatever the case may be. So this problem of getting people to think differently, it's like teaching people to imagine a world where nobody had locks on doors. It's like teaching people, okay, you got to carry a key around, and you got to put it in the front of your house when you want to get into it. This whole new education on, particularly I think on holding private keys or other credentials, it's a big effort, and I don't know how we win it.
I'll just say I think that a lot of people can be taught. I'm not a person who's skeptical. I know there are some people who are skeptical of self-custody because they think that most people won't be able to achieve the level of education and self-awareness to hold on to assets themselves. But I think that maybe there won't be a movement of everyone having the 24-word phrase. But if you look at options of like Shamir sharding, that's a possibility where you could develop your web of trust, where you could say, these are my trusted family members who they're going to hold on to my shards, and so that if I lose my wallet, I can have it put back together. And Ledger got a lot of heat for when they put out their backup built into their software. So if you had a ledger, it would automatically your keys would be sharded and then sent to their servers to be safe kept. And it's like, guys, this is the blockchain. Why didn't you come up with a system where they could designate other ledger users to be the key holders for you on your behalf and say these are your trustees of your shards? I think that there's a lot of hope for things like that, to where we could leverage existing understanding of social connections to help people make that understanding and connection.
Just quickly, I would really love to see a proposal or for how we can guide the government, and there's lots of problems with this, to give everyone, if not like a hardware wallet, some amount of cryptocurrency, just a small amount, so that they have a vested interest in learning how to use it. In the Bitcoin community and in the crypto community, there's very much an attitude of, you need to learn how to do this, figure it out. If you can't, figure it out, then, it's your loss. And I think that makes sense to a degree, given how slightly more complex it is to manage a crypto wallet versus a bank account. But at the very least, and I hope very much that we see this in the coming couple of years, if Donald Trump and J.D. Vance win the election, that we start to see some more discussion about this at the very highest level of government, the executive branch and the cabinet, that there's a concerted effort made to inform the public of the importance of this sort of technology, just like we tell people to, pay their taxes and get a bank account.
Next question. Is that it? Oh, back there.
I'm all the way over here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious how, when Bitcoin was adopted, it was supposedly the anonymous way to, it was Silk Road, all that stuff. It was an anonymous way to transfer money. And now we're at Know Your Customer. We're at, there's all of these rules and regulations and I recognize that that's part of adopting it and rolling it out, but I'm just a little bit concerned the direction that the government is pushing everybody to, the whole, the whole Bitcoin thing, and how do you reconcile that, the initial impact of Bitcoin with today's world of digitized, non-anonymous transactions?
Yeah, I think that looking at its foundings as a anonymous or at least pseudonymous system to the current system is quite different. So what do you think?
Yeah, just quickly, I would say, pseudonymity, it's never really been a guarantee of anonymity. As an example, a lot of those people who are on Silk Road are now in federal prison for a very long time. But as far as I think people who really want to prioritize privacy and anonymity, there are lots of cool tools that have been built in the crypto ecosystem, like Monero and decentralized exchanges, that they can do what they want to do anonymously as not quite as anonymously as cash maybe, but pretty darn close. I think for most Americans, complete anonymity just isn't that important. The revealed preference of Americans is to use something like Bitcoin or stable coins to move money around, not these things like Monero. And so we're kind of reaching a point at which people are treating it a lot like their other assets. And there's products out there for people who want more privacy. But
I think there are two dynamics that Satoshi didn't recognize when he put out the white paper. He, she, or they put out the white paper. One was the ASIC chip. I think Satoshi was pretty sure that the mining was going to be all over the place, and not the ASIC chip centralized mining significantly. It's been a concern for a long time and still is. The other one is the way the public key acts as an identifier. And so you've got the companies now that quite adeptly track transactions and track relationships among transactions. And so that's another big flaw in Bitcoin as is. And obviously a lot of other cryptos have adopted that very same flaw. So, and the government is taking advantage of that. So if you're a financial services provider in crypto or any other type, you've got to do the know your customer and all this stuff. And so they're sort of pushing us to that. And sometimes you hear this notion that unhosted wallets are going to be outlawed or something like that. Pretty absurd, in my opinion, and hopefully constitutionally absurd as well. But I analogize it to back in the day. I don't know if you're here, but I characterize myself as the old guy, easily done. Back in the day, you had this walled garden dynamic where everyone was on AOL or CompuServe Prodigy, and those companies wanted it that way. But before long, the access that they got to internet-like stuff through those services made them demand access to the whole enchilada, to the whole 9 yards. And the hope is, which is only a hope, I don't have any certainty that or way to assure that this is what happens, is that people getting access to crypto in the current walled garden-ish atmosphere suddenly go, hang on a second, I can just transfer without you platform. I can just trade without you platform. I can do lots and lots of stuff through people who aren't KYCable or aren't required to do KYC on me. I think other things have to happen in addition. I would really like just the policy to drop entirely because it's a failure. But there's a little bit of that walled garden to open internet dynamic that I would hope for in the Bitcoin and crypto area.
That's great. All right. Well, I think that's the end of the time we have for our session. So I'd like to thank everyone again for being a great audience. Thank you, Nick and Jim, for being here. We've had a great time discussing this, and I'll turn it back over to Kala for our whatever comes next. Thank you.
Thank you.